Hi, this is Renee Coster from Learning Experience Design for Changemakers. I started working with Kim after taking her email course on finding your podcast name. I then signed up for her podcast growth strategy session. At the time, I was only thinking about an interview series, but after talking with Kim, I was fully on board with hosting a podcast. And because of her guidance, I was able to launch my podcast with confidence, and I've seen consistent growth each week. Thank you, Kim, for helping me find and share my voice.
Did you know that every week I set aside about a half an hour of time where anyone that is in my programs can come and ask me any questions? So, this is a little like a group coaching program, but it is what we call office hours. And so on Mondays from 3 to 3:30 Eastern Time, I have open hours. If you are a person that is in any of my programs, you can join and you can ask any question about your podcast or your business that you might need an answer to. My name's Kim Parkinson. You're listening to Podcasting for Your Spiritual Business. I am a podcast growth strategist, a certified podcast growth coach. I've been doing podcast production for 6 years now, and I was actually an executive producer on my own TV show prior to that. So I have a little bit of past knowledge on just anything that has to do with production, anything that has to do with podcasting, or in that case, TV at that time. So I know a little bit about YouTube, a little bit about, TV production, a lot about podcasting, and a lot about growing your podcast and launching your podcast too. So I can feel like I can call myself a little bit of an expert when we are talking about all things podcasting, because I don't just know how to launch and grow your show, but I know like the soup and nuts of all of the pieces that go into the production side. And more recently, probably within the last 9 months or so, I've been really focusing on a couple of clients with their video podcasting. And that has been an adventure. I'm not completely sold on it myself, but they're willing to kind of play with that and willing to work with that. And it's been quite an adventure to see that. So today, based on all of my expertise and based on everything that I do, I thought I'm going to grab a couple of questions that people have asked me in office hours, and I'm going to answer them here. So, one of my clients has asked me a question specifically around cover art. Now, if you go back to episode 068, I offered up 5 easy podcast refresh tips for your summer slowdown. Now, summer slowdown is a real thing for most people. I will say I'm pleasantly surprised that most of my clients have seen either the numbers stay the same or grow, which is really amazing, right? So, if you have not taken a listen to 068, the 5 easy podcast refresh tips, then I highly suggest going back and listening to that, because there is some things that you can do still now before the podcast growth season starts in just a few weeks. So let's cover some of the questions that they asked me about. The first one is changing your cover art. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but I have been kind of updating my cover art as well. I originally had it as it was original when I first started. So it originally said, I think, if I remember correctly, podcasting for spiritual women, I think is what it said. maybe I'm wrong, but I had left that there and decided I wasn't going to update it until summer came, because it's a perfect time to do any kind of refreshes, right? So I updated that in June. And I realized after 30 days that maybe it wasn't moving the needle as I wanted it to. And so I rearranged and changed a few extra things too. So what I did was I changed the colors and I changed the font, and I just did a little bit of changes, not a ton, just a little bit. How do I kind of go by why I needed to make these changes? I leave it there for 30 days. So when you make a change, the first thing I want you to look at when you make that change is open up your Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast and take a look. Can you clearly read the most important words at arm's length? I know that's important. And the beautiful part is if you can find your podcast in like a tiny little kind of like there's other podcasts there and you can find your cover art and it's really tiny. And by tiny, I'm saying like on my phone and I have a Pro Max. So I have one of the bigger ones, but if you can find on your phone the like I think it's like half inch by half inch size podcast cover art and you can't read the most important word on there, which for mine would be spiritual, podcasting, and business, then you maybe need to reevaluate that particular cover art. If there's not a contrast enough between your background and that cover art, maybe something needs to be done there. Now, it's beautiful when you have it on your screen that's larger than life. And, maybe you've got a huge screen, or maybe it's just a laptop screen. You're like, oh, no, it looks great. That's fine. And I totally get it. But if you can't really see it and read what it says on your phone, then you might be missing out on some listeners, right? So that's the first step is kind of hold it at arm's length. Can you read those? If you're too close to it and you're like, you know what? I don't know. I think it is. Ask somebody else. Ask a friend, your spouse, your significant other, your child, whatever. What can they see at arm's length? What do they read when you're holding it out there? And if they say to you, I don't know, let me see it closer, then your words aren't big enough. And by words big enough, I actually had this conversation just this week. You want it from like 1 pixel to 2,999 pixel. You want that important word to go all the way across the page. Don't be like, this is not Instagram where you have to make sure it's in a special box in the center or anything like this. This is podcast cover art. This is as far from one to the other without going over, obviously. So when you change your cover art, leave it there for 30 days. If you've seen some uptick in your numbers in those 30 days and you've made no other changes, that's also important. This is kind of business basics 101. You can't go in there and change a whole bunch of things and then be like, oh, I don't know what changed, right? I changed a bunch of things. Did that work? Maybe it did. I don't know. So you really want to make sure that you kind of do one thing at a time. And so if you've been following along and you did your podcast cover art, it might be time to take a look at your stats and see, are those stats increasing? Especially during the summer. That's a beautiful time, right? For those numbers to be increasing. So again, how do we know if it was a success when we changed the cover art? We want to see those numbers kind of climb over the next 30 days, right? That's the data that we want to look at. And then again at 60 days and again at 90 days. And here's the thing, if you change your cover art every 60 days, that's fine. You're not going to lose listeners. You're just going to gain new listeners. So where's the part there that doesn't work out in your favor? So definitely take a look at that. If that is something that you can put in your wheelhouse to do every quarter, look at your cover art. Yeah, do it and change it up. See if you can get new listeners and if you can move that needle on being seen and being more visible to people in those podcast apps. Remember, they're really tiny, so you want them to be something that really sticks out. All right, that was the question about the podcast cover art that I got from my client. Another question that a client asked was, she just recently got to 10K downloads, and that's a milestone. And she wanted to know why it matters. Does it really matter? And here's my answer. If it doesn't matter to you, and it doesn't matter, you can get clients from having, 50 downloads, or you have to wait until you get 20,000 downloads. It really is a matter of, are you happy that you got 10K downloads? Then that's a great benchmark. I'm at the point where I feel like that is the first benchmark that I look for with clients is getting to 100 downloads an episode after 30 days. If you've got an episode in 30 days old and it's got 100 downloads, excellent. Now, after the second benchmark would be after 30 days, does that get 250 downloads, 500 downloads? That is when you know you're moving the needle. That is when you know you're reaching more and more people. Now, this doesn't happen overnight for everyone. I will totally acknowledge that. There are definitely times where this is going to take a long time. What I've been seeing is that people will start to really get that traction on their numbers after episode 100. I know that if you're only doing one episode a week, that is legitimately 2 years of podcast consistency. And I had a conversation this weekend with a friend of mine, and we were traveling to the New England Podcasters Group meetup, and she was coming with me. And she asked, what is the benchmark here? What is this? And when I told her that you really start to see real big growth after episode 100, that's when the growth numbers really start jumping. And she said, that makes sense because most businesses don't start to take off until years 2 to 5. And that's exactly right. That is when you start to see growth in your podcast, years 2 to 5. Now, can it happen earlier? Absolutely. And especially if you are a big name person, right? Absolutely. Like these people that are out there, they're seeing numbers that are in, 10,000s, 20,000s, whatever thousands per episode after just one day. That's the unusual people. What you're looking for is a number of downloads based on the number of your episode. If you are under episode, say 75, and you are releasing well, just go with 75. You're releasing episode 75. After 30 days, I expect to see that you're going to have 75 downloads. And this is accurate for reduced numbers too. So if you are releasing episode 13 and after 30 days, you're seeing 13 downloads, that's about right. That's about exactly where you're supposed to be. Can it happen faster and can it happen more? Yeah, absolutely. And think of it this way. If you're on episode 55 and after 30 days you've had 55 downloads, that's 55 people that have walked into your room and said, I want to listen to you. That's a great number. If you had 55 people in your office right now, how would that feel to you? That would probably be really, you might feel a little claustrophobic, or you might be ecstatic that you have that many people, or overwhelmed that you have that many people. So think of it that way, right? You want to make sure that there is the same number that you're releasing is the same number of downloads that you have. And the reason I bring this up is I actually just recently had somebody reach out to me and they said that they were getting, 1,000 downloads and that they didn't think that that was a good number. And I said, I actually think that's an excellent number. If you're getting 1,000 downloads on your podcast after 30 days, I think that that is spectacular. She actually was wondering whether or not she should give this podcast up because she wanted to start a new one. And she was like, I'm not exactly sure. Are these good numbers? Are these good benchmark numbers? Because she was in the area, the realm of people, a mastermind or wherever her friends were, and they had podcasts and they were saying they were getting millions of downloads. I can't verify her friends, obviously. I can't verify the other podcasters, but what I can say is that getting millions of downloads, I speculate that that is probably not true because unless you are, let's go with the big names here, unless you're Amy Porterfield, unless you are maybe Jenna Kutcher, I'm not sure, Mel Robbins, Joe Rogan, any one of those big names, your client or your friend's podcast would be in the pod newsletters all the time because their podcast would be top 1 in Spotify, top 2 in Apple, whatever those numbers are, right? And if you're not seeing them there, I doubt they're getting millions of downloads per episode. Realistically, if you're just starting out, again, you're looking at the number and the number. So your number of episode is the number of downloads you get. after 100, we're looking at 100 downloads an episode after 30 days. And then if you are above that, and here's the other thing, longevity matters, right? This person's been putting out a podcast since 2020. And so she's getting some really great download numbers. Great. That is excellent because she's got longevity. She's got a really great podcast. She's well over number 100. And, while she might be comparing herself to her friends, don't ever do that. Don't compare yourself to your friends because they might be not telling you the truth. And two, it's your journey, not their journey. And it doesn't really matter how many downloads that you end up getting. If you are calling in clients and you're getting repetitive people reaching out to you about your podcast, that's really what matters. That is really what moves the needle for you, right? Getting those clients to be called in. So in this particular case, I have to go back to does the 10K download milestone actually matter? I will say that's a vanity metric. That's a vanity metric. That is something that you can say, I have 10,000 downloads, or you can, whatever it might be if you want it. Do I acknowledge it for clients? Yes, because sometimes they do want to acknowledge it out there. Like, hey, I've got 10,000 downloads. I've been podcasting for over, a year, over 2 years, over 3 years, and I have reached this milestone and I'm super excited about it. And that excitement brings on more listeners because when you're excited about it, you're going to share it and then other people are going to share it. And then, so that could be just the excitement part of it, right? So does 10,000 downloads, and this is a cumulative, not per episode, by the way, does it matter? It matters to you. And that's what really matters, right? So, all right. Another question that I have is, how do I get clients from my podcast? So this one actually requires a little bit of research as far as I would have to take a look, or you would have to take a look. Are you asking people to be clients in your episodes? Are you giving really valuable information and then saying, hey, I am looking for 5 people to work with me this week. Please reach out. I have this, this, and this that you can have, and I'm going to, do something. You can ask them to sign up for a discovery call. You can ask them to sign up for your newsletter, or you can ask them to sign up for maybe a free coaching or something like that. Now, those types of requests in your podcast will then bring those people into your world. And then it's up to you to nurture and move that needle forward. It's very rare. It does happen, but it's very rare that somebody's going to walk into your world and say, hey, I want to work with you. I absolutely love you. And here's the other thing. Maybe you don't want to work with them. Maybe they're really Coco Loco and you're like, I thank you for being a avid listener, but right now I'm really booked solid. I've never done this, but I know that you really need to be picky about who you work with if they are not a good fit. So make sure that you ask in your episodes, and you can ask anytime. I talked about my office hours real upfront here in this particular episode. Those office hours right now, if you just wanted to do office hours with me on a monthly basis, that's $97 a month. And you can come in every Monday between 3 and 3:30 Eastern time, and you can ask any kind of podcasting question. There could be other people in there, and so you'd share the limelight with them, but you'd get your questions answered. Now, if you wanted to do other parts of my programs, I have one-on-ones and I have other things that I do, the Podcast Growth Accelerator. I have a bunch of other options that you could use to work with me. But I really feel like right now, a lot of times people just want to ask me questions and pick my brain. And so I came up with this office hours in order to be able to provide that for you. Right away, at the very beginning of this episode, I told you about office hours. And then here I am again mentioning office hours, and I mentioned the price of the office hours. And while that may not stay that price forever, it is that price as of August 10th, 2026. So, if you're interested in getting in there, I'll leave the link down below so you can get in at the founders level right now. But that is an example of trying to get clients from your podcast. And I say trying because sometimes it works. Sometimes it's a couple months before somebody hears it. It is summertime after all. I'm recording this in early August. So it's summertime and maybe nobody's going to hear this until November. And that's actually okay too, because I've had people that have listened to previous episodes email me months later and said, "Hey, I've listened to this and I want to know more about it." And that is the direct relation to asking in the episode, no matter what. And just knowing that those things can be evergreen and somebody might reach out to you at a much later date. And that later date could be 1 week, 1 day, or it could be 6 months. Or if you've been doing podcasting that long, maybe it's 6 years. You never know. Yes, your offers could have changed. And yes, maybe then you say to them, that was episode 2, and I did that back in 2017, and I don't have that offer anymore. But you know what? It's now up to you to make that connection. And then it's up to you to make that next offer, that next step. What is that next step with you? If you don't offer that one anymore, then don't immediately dismiss what they have, but say, I have this offer now, and this is the new pricing, or this is the new whatever it might be, and then move on from there. So that's one way of getting clients from your podcast. It's always easiest if you can get them into your newsletter, get them into your email box somehow, because again, you can vet them. They've already vetted you by listening. You've already created that authority piece. So now you can vet them and you can decide whether or not you want to work with them. But asking them to reach out, asking them to join the newsletter, asking them to do something, get on a one-on-one, a discovery call, podcast growth call, whatever calls you have, right? Coaching call, whatever that might be, or maybe give them a free ticket to your office hours if you have that availability or that ability to do that, if you have those. That could be another great way of just, again, showing your authority and opening that door so that they can step in and then they can start paying you for what it is that you do. So that is a way to get clients from your podcast. Your podcast really is that authority piece. This is you basically saying what you do, who you are, how you do it, and then giving value every week. And when you do that, it's going to be those listeners that find you. And again, all of the finding is going to be talked about in episode 68, where, you talk about your cover art, you talk about your description, you talk about maybe your name, a bunch of other things there, right? All of that has been done so they could find you. Then they listen, they understand you, they really connect with you, they really want to work with you. They reach out through whatever CTA that you offered in that podcast episode. And then it's up to you to move that needle forward once they've reached out. And that's how it's done. It is a linear process, let me say that, but it is not always a fast process. Depends on what it is that you're talking about, depends on your niche, depends on who it is that you're talking to or talking about, what process, all that. There's a lot of different variables there. And that's why when I talk to my clients, we try to see what the best way is for you. Is it to get them into that newsletter, or is it I want to get into a discovery call or a free coaching call of some kind? Every person may have a different way of getting those people to move the needle to the next step. And, some people even use sign up and follow me on Instagram. I'm not a huge Instagrammer. So if you want to follow me on Instagram, you're welcome to. But I really only send out stories and occasionally send out something, I think once a week. It's not my best place to be. My best place to be is actually my podcast. That is where you learn much more about me, how I think, how I work, how I do things. And that's where you're going to really get to understand me the most. And that is what you want. You want people to come in, listen, and really trust you and what you have to say. All right. What should you focus on for the rest of the summer? Focus on those stats. If you don't have some way to collect and keep track of your stats, I recommend that you do that right now. And here's the thing about the stats. I do have a podcast stats spreadsheet. I think I can probably link that here. Hopefully, I've got that. If I don't and you want it, reach out to me, Kim at kpcreativemedia.com, and I can get you that spreadsheet. But basically, it's going to have the number of your episode. It's going to be whether or not it's a solo, a interview, a coaching call, whatever. It's going to have what the topic's about. It's going to have what your podcast name is that you named it right now, because that could change. And then it's going to be, did I say the release date? I think the release date is in there as well, right before that. And then it's going to say your 30-day download numbers on your hosting platform. And hopefully you also added your RSS feed to YouTube. You can have that. Nowadays, I've also been adding in the stats for Substack because I'm not thoroughly convinced that Substacks are transferring over to Captivate. So I'm keeping track of them to see if there's some overlap there. So just know I might come back and talk about that. But right now it is your hosting platform, it is YouTube, it is Substack. And then if you do put video up onto Spotify, you might want to do that separately as well. I know that's a lot, right? It's a lot. And that is per episode after 30 days. And then the same 4 columns. So your hosting platform, YouTube, Substack, and Spotify, if you're using all of those, for 60 days and then for 90 days. And every 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, those numbers should increase for the episodes. You'll see the biggest jump on episode, after 30 days. And then you should see a slight increase at 60 days and some moderate increase after 90 days. I have asked people before whether or not they are interested in listening to podcast episodes that are, years old. And the mini poll that I did said, yes, they are, which floored me, by the way. But I still see quite a decline in the numbers after 90 days. Not a decline in the numbers, but the decline of people listening after 90 days. So I would say that an episode, unless you're talking about that episode on a regular basis, it's a pillar episode. I would say an episode after 90 days starts to get stale. If you can, bring it back into the fold, find a way for people to go back and listen to it, maybe have that conversation about it again, just reinvigorate that. If you want, maybe change the title of that. If you really think that's a really great episode and you want people to listen, that could be something too. Now you'll always get those super fans that will start at episode 1 and just go right through all of them. So there will be occasionally a number. And of course, if it is something specific that people want to learn about and the keywords are there, they're going to listen to that episode. So biggest jump of numbers is going to be your episode after 30 days. There's going to be a nice little jump after 60 days and then a moderate jump after 90 days. And by moderate, it could be just 1. It really could be just 1 or 2. Or, if your downloads are in the thousands, it could be just 100. Your moderate is different based on how old your podcast is, how many episodes you've put out, and how many people are, regularly listening and what your numbers are right now. So there's a lot of different variables. You are exactly where you need to be right now. And if you are just looking to move that needle just a little bit more, there's still time to do it. So focus on your stats. See where those numbers are. Can you change the names, the titles of those episodes? Can you maybe look at your description again? Can you look at that podcast cover art if you didn't already before? And then the most important part, consistency. Consistency is key. There are people in the United States already, and I'm in the US, so that's why I mentioned this, that their kids have already gone back to school. So that means that they are already starting a routine. I'm in the Northeast. I'm right outside of Boston. Our kids don't go back until right before or right after Labor Day. So we've got a couple more weeks of summertime here. So I would say that for me, the consistency for my listeners in this area won't be until probably September. And that is when the next podcast growth season starts. September, October, and most of November. And you really want to be set up for the next dip in decline, which is just going to be for the month of December. And that is probably going to start the week of Thanksgiving through the end of the year, realistically. And then You may see a slight decline in January at the very beginning because there's a ton of people that put out a ton of new podcasts. And then I would say by 6 weeks into the new year or 8 weeks into the new year, a lot of those people have said, nope, I'm not going to podcast anymore. And they'll decline. And then the podcast listeners will come back to those that have consistent content that have been just podcasting all along, which hopefully is you. All right. Those are just a couple of different questions that I have gotten over the last couple of weeks in my office hours. So again, if you are interested in joining office hours, it's $97 a month. You can come and join anytime. And then you can get a month's worth of, office hours, asking me any questions that you might have. Now, I'm not going to launch your podcast for you. I'm not going to go in depth into stuff. These are just simple questions, by the way. Like, yes, there are a couple where maybe we dive deeper into like what we talked about today. But if you're coming in and you're like, hey, I want to launch a podcast, how do I do it? I'm probably not going to answer that for you there that way because I have an entire program for that. So these are simple, easy, like, hey, my microphone has a tinny sound. Is there any way that I can fix that? And then we can talk about how you record and some things like that in there. Or maybe you just have like what do you think of this cover art? Is this cover art even working? Or what do you think my keywords should be for this particular podcast? Or do you mind if we kind of take a look to see where my stats are? Because I don't even know. And those are questions that we handle in office hours. So that kind of gives you an idea of what I do and how I help people in the office hours. And I'll leave that link again in the show notes. And I hopefully will see you in the next one. All right, where your voice flows, your business grows. See you soon. Thank you so much for being here and spending this time with me today. If you're ready to deepen your visibility and grow your podcast in a way that feels aligned, come join my email list at kpcreativemedia.com/newsletter, where I share exclusive guidance, support, and next steps. And if this episode resonated, I'd be so honored if you left a review on Apple Podcasts. It's one of the most powerful ways to support the show and help other spiritual women discover it. Until next time, keep showing up and sharing your voice.